homesick, man. I got so, but I was out there.
You
So,
know what? Look, I get it. I mean, I've been there, and I am not at all saying that they should not have had these moments of retrenchment. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying, riding to the rescue, saying that what they're going through is typical of what black women have gone through throughout the ages. I don't think that that is an applicable comparison. That's all I'm saying.
oh, you know what? I hear what you're saying on that, Nick. But you know, she made a statement. She said she feels as though the weight of the world is on her because, for one, she's a young black woman, and all we worry about is gold medals, right? And she knew that the pressure is on her. She the best on her team. She done did things that people even dream about doing. I mean, they naming stuff after her moves.
Oh,
So,
hey, look, man,
you know,
I don't, I have nightmares about doing that kind of thing.
what, Nick,
If
can
all
you
of this go
imagine?
flipping and flying through the air, somebody gonna get
Oh,
hurt when it
my.
lands.
Look, I got gold medals will be there. You got enough gold medals and stuff. But I would hate to see her not do what she's doing. She's not feeling it, and then really hurt herself because that's not a joke.
Man, look, Jacob,
Yeah.
fully agree with that. The only point I'm making is it is not an apropos comparison to the pressures and stresses that our black sisters have gone through for the last 400 years. Shoot, longer than that, before you even get to America. It wasn't no crystal stair just because you were in Africa. You know,
Hey Nick, I feel you, but you still gonna catch hell, you know.
Oh, I'm going to catch hell on roller skates, my friend.
Okay, I'm out, Nick. Peace.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate it. I'm waiting for the sisters to chime in. You know, as we used to say back home, where y'all at, ladies? Where y'all be? I'm waiting to hear from the sisters, and all I'm getting is brothers. This is amazing. Let's go with Reverend Joe in Mount Airy. Reverend Joe, thank you for the call. Welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, Reverend. You and Eric. I apologize for calling back 2 days in a row, but in church they call it confirmation. I just spoke to Dr. Iger this morning, and I told Dr. Iger there ought to be a team of people, and I need one more person on my team, and the guy's last name starts with a T, to talk to young folk if they get depressed or lonely or whatever it may be, especially if they become famous. Now, she was the world's greatest. It's going to be people calling her and saying to her, never speak to her before. You got to forewarn people, this is what's going to happen. And if it happens, just call this number. We can talk to you something because these folks, it will be people don't want to see her succeed. When Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's records, he had people call him up trying to say it was
yes.
So this world is mean. So we've got to throw arms around it. Especially young folks that wouldn't even dream of somebody's going to do something to them. Yeah. You know, they might have even a little girl running track. She did very well, and then somebody probably said, just smoke this, you'll be all right. If there was into that, if they found out. So I think we better really understand, welcome to America. If you're a black young lady or a man, you're going to be tempted by a certain thirst you never even dreamed of, but we're going to have ways of shaking it off or have somebody you can call and say, we just talked to you now. I ain't talking about preaching to folks and all that other slave stuff. I'm just talking about let them know this might happen. So when it happens, you know, even if you don't drink, you know, when I was in sales, since I didn't drink, I'd order soda, act like I was drinking with the people, but I was drinking soda. If you got to have some kind of way of knowing this could happen to you. Nothing personal, but they don't care, Doc. Now, that young lady, I'm so glad she's trying to get herself together. There's too much pressure, see. So.
Well, you know, I will tell you, it is enormous pressure. I mean, you know, the real problem is that we create the demand for the celebrity star-making machine to turn human beings into products. We create that demand. And I agree that it's tough, but it is something that you sign on for.
Yeah,
and it gets you millions of dollars.
But if you don't know what's coming, you make it decide. I think they don't look at that part of when the millions of dollars start to come. But you got to have them understand. Everybody don't love you. One last thing, I'll get off real quick. Dr. Reggie Bryan and I was at the University of Pennsylvania one night, a front row at a lecture by the head of the medical department, and this is what she said, Reverend. When a sick person, when we walk by a person's bed, we look at the chart to see if they're black or white. That determines what kind of medicine or what kind of treatment they're going to get. She said that out on the stage. I mean, with no holding back. That determines, and it's still happening today. So you're right on target with all these subjects. Just keep doing what you're doing.
It'll get good. It gets even gooder at 5:30. So stay with us. Thank you, Reverend Joe. I appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I wade now tentatively in the direction of our next caller, and that is our esteemed state representative, Darisha Parker. Representative Parker, what shall happen to me now?
You're just lucky that, thank you for taking
the proud 198th. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and continue our phone calls with you. Coming along at 5 o'clock, we check in with Dr. Akua Boateng, and we'll get another perspective on this issue of pressure and stress in positions of high performance. Stay with us, folks. This is Evening Words, 16 minutes away from the hour of 5. We'll return momentarily.
The Mattress Man is a second-generation family-owned mattress specialist business since 1988. Open 7 days a week, located at 7421 Stenton Avenue. The Mattress Man discounts Serta, memory foam, orthopedic, and ComfortTech mattresses every day. You deal directly with the owner, Julian, to ensure you get the best price and best service. The Mattress Man offers same-day delivery on most models to most areas. Ask about the WURD discount. Call 215-424-5550.
Hey WURD family, did you hear? It's official. The Colorectal Cancer Alliance just announced the new age for colon cancer screenings has been officially lowered to age 45 for everyone. If you are 45 or older, it's time to get screened. Go to WURDradio.com and click on the Go to Know banner to register for your free at-home screening test. Did you know colon cancer is largely preventable with on-time screening? And there's a 90% survival rate when caught early. African Americans are 20% more likely to get colon cancer and about 40% more likely to die from it than most other groups. So for the next 3 months, you can go to WURDradio.com and click on the Go to Know banner for your free at-home screening test. A screening navigator will contact you to ask a few questions and help you get screened. It's that simple. Again, just go to WURDradio.com, click on the Go to Know banner, and fill out the form to request your free at-home screening test. Go to Know today.
WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at ForWord. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Hey, folks, back with you here talking about the Simone Biles situation. I want to be clear. I know the stress is incredible. I can't imagine what it's like to be considered the best in the world, where second place is failure for you. I mean, that's the stress she's under. I want to draw attention to the fact that we live in a society where star-making machinery puts the demand out there that people be superhuman. They have to be always on top of their game. The problem is that it is all based on money. It's not simply based on excellence. It's based on money. You have to be excellent, and you have to be promotable. When Martin Luther King, when Muhammad Ali wasn't promotable, then all of a sudden, then he wasn't the champ anymore. You have to be promotable. People have to be able to make money off of your success. You sign on to be a part of the star-making machinery that is idolatry, folks. That's what it is. It's idolatry. And then when the stress gets to you, you need to take a break. But the fact of the matter is, what you're taking a break from is an unnatural thing. It is not the natural, normal stresses that people go through. It is an unnatural thing. And it's not based simply on, look, I'm just howling in the night because people aren't buying what I'm saying. Cliff in Connecticut, welcome to the show, and thanks for your call.
Hey, Nick, thanks for taking my call. I want to give you another perspective. I don't know if you knew about this. This was brought to my attention, which makes sense. With Simone and Naomi, particularly with Simone, she was excellent, far beyond her time, and her moves were so her performance and her technique was so amazing that she, if you watch some of her videos, they said that she made moves that nobody's ever even seen in terms of performance. So what happened was the committee approached her and told her that they couldn't give her the value of her performance that exceeded what they did on a normal basis. So, for example, if you're rating a performance from 1 to 10, her moves were actually a 20, but they couldn't rate that, so they can only give you a 10. So with that being said, they said to her that she has to tone down her performance because the other competitors couldn't compete or even duplicate her moves because it might cause injury. So if you get that type of response coming from a committee where you are limited and you cannot reach or perform at your potential, what does that do? That would make me stressful too. You know, in addition to that, and now let me also add to that, the tennis player, Naomi, another one. You know, and if you looked at her bio and looked at her background, this sister was completely into black activism, not being vocal, but she was conscious. She would wear the mask, saying Black Lives Matter, and then, trust me, what the white establishment and what the people wanted you to do is, if you're an athlete, they want you to keep your mouth shut and not even mention or recognize this injustice when it comes out to race. So this pick up the ball,
but I mean,
and
Cliff, this is all good stuff, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm not exactly sure how. I mean, if you're saying that being a successful athlete is stressful, and that being a black successful athlete is stressful, yes, because you know, being an icon, being turned into a commodity is stressful. I mean, listen, I am not a star. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a guy on radio. But this can become stressful at times. So I get
you know what,
that.
Brother Nick, let me give you one more example and I'll hang up. Listen, the testimony, if you saw the police officer that gave testimony, he was stressed. He's going to have a mental ordeal dealing with what happened on January the 6th.
But that's real. Now, see, now we're talking about real. Now, if you want to make a comparison with what the police officers who went through what they went through on January the 6th and other individuals living their daily lives, I get that. But when you're comparing it to someone who's making millions of dollars to perform, and at the time of performance she says, I just can't go through with it, then fine, take the break. Take that break. But it is not comparable to a person who is just every day they have to go out and punch that clock and pick those kids up from school and make that dinner. It is not comparable. That's the only thing I'm saying.
In closing, all I'm saying is that we as black people, we're stressed. We've got to deal with the issue of racism. That's why racism should be declared on a national level as a health issue, a health crisis. Because we as black people have to contend with that. Thank you, brother.
I got you. Much appreciated, Cliff. Well, you know, in a moment or two, we'll have the expert on. I mean, we will have the expert on to talk about it, and I will be put in my place, or I will be, I don't know if I'll be justified, but, or maybe what I'm saying we put in proper context. But we'll be joined in just a few by Dr. Akua Boateng, who is a practicing therapist here in the city of Philadelphia. Dr. Boateng, she's a native of California, but descends from the mother continent herself and is a great therapist. And we'll talk about these stresses and we'll see if we can get some context to what's going on in the life of these young sisters. Am I empathetic? Absolutely. But what I am saying is to say we need to run to their aids and say, we understand you poor sisters, because being a black woman is so stressful in the world today. Nuh-uh, not quite. Being a star athlete and being under the stress to perform, I mean, think about it from this perspective. Think about Ben Simmons. You know, that boy was under some deep stress. He knew he wasn't scoring. He knew he couldn't shoot a foul shot. And when he had that ball in that last game, and he had a chance to take a shot, but knowing he might be fouled and have to go stand on that line and throw the ball 3 different zip codes away, which is what he had been doing, he passed that ball because the stress got to him. I get that. But I wouldn't say, man, he's going through what a guy who's working on a trash truck trying to figure out how to pay the bills, and completely different thing. That is all I'm trying to say to you. Coming up at 5:30, ladies and gentlemen, we will be joined by two 4-star guests as we introduce a new segment that focuses on health with our friends from Just Human. We'll be speaking with Dr. Celine Gounder. She is an HIV infectious disease specialist and an internist at the New York University School of Medicine, the host and producer of the Epidemic and American Diagnosis podcast. We'll be sharing a podcast with you from 5 o'clock to 5:30 on the infamous treatment of Black people in the name of medical care. You do not want to miss that. And then we're going to have a conversation about race. We're going to have a conversation about medical care. We're going to have a conversation about vaccines. We're going to have a conversation about disease. And we'll be joined by Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. She is the University Professor of Medical Humanities at the highly esteemed George Washington University. All of that good stuff coming your way at 5:30. And before that, Dr. Akuya Boateng. We're going to really dig deep today, ladies and gentlemen, giving you the kind of answers that you've been looking for, sometimes the questions that you haven't even asked yet. This is 900 AM, 96.1 FM, Evening Words. I'm Nick Taliaferro. How many of you are taking notice of the fact that my voice is just starting to disappear again? I mean, I've got to do something about that because, if I'm not talking, there's a good chance that I'm not able to put groceries on the table. So I've got to make sure that I find my voice all over again. We'll be taking your calls a little bit later on as well. There was one other person that I wanted to make mention of from the Olympics. Ashley Johnson, the water polo player. Check her out. That young lady is really doing it. Now, she's flying under the radar. She's under pressure, but not the extreme pressure that some of these other sisters are under. But you want to make sure that you do check her out. Okay, let's take that quick pause. Wednesday, July the 28th, 3.5 minutes away from the hour of 5. This is WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM. Stay with us.
Build skills needed for employment through the Philadelphia Skills Forward Initiative, a free upskilling program for workers displaced by the pandemic, those whose jobs are at risk for automation, and Black and brown workers. Complete courses focused on digital literacy, career management, and professional skills for a successful career. Get started today at chamberphl.com.
So, what's the asking price on this house?
You'd probably be more comfortable living somewhere else.
How long a lease is the landlord looking for?
Well, I'm sure you can afford to live here, but...
What are the schools like in this district?
Yeah, we have twins in the 5th grade.
This neighborhood isn't really for your kids. You know what I mean?
If you're Black, Latino, Asian American, or Middle Eastern, and a real estate agent or rental agent says anything like this, you know what it means. You're being discriminated against. Housing discrimination because of race, color, or national origin is against the law. If you believe you've experienced housing discrimination, contact HUD. Go to HUD.gov/fair housing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Fair housing. The law is on your side. A message from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Be there this Friday at the Summer of Freedom Neighborhood Love Tour as Tiffany Bacon broadcasts live from the J.L. Wright Community Center, 3320 Haverford Avenue, from 10 a.m. till noon, and stand with WURD Radio to amplify voices of the Black community as a digital forward member for as low as $5 per month and receive a free gift for signing up. That's this Friday at the J.L. Wright Community Center, 3320 Haverford Avenue, or visit wordradio.com. Start or renew your forward membership today.
Are you looking for a job? WURD has got you covered. We just launched a brand new job portal featuring jobs from some of Philadelphia's leading companies and arts organizations. If you go to the portal right now, you will see jobs from WURD Radio, the Kimmel Center, Her Foods, Always Best Care, and more. Apply for a job today. Go to our livelihood website at wordworks.com. That's WURDworks.com and click jobs.
This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Independent Black Media. WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at ForWord. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Hey, sometimes, folks, it's better to be lucky than to be smart. I'm not all that smart, but every once in a while I get really lucky, and that allows me to reach out and to avail myself of the professional expertise of individuals who are really trained in the arts and sciences of help and healing. And when you're talking about stress, who better to talk to than a licensed psychotherapist practicing right here in the city of Philadelphia? Please make welcome, ladies and gentlemen, a woman that I have come to know and appreciate and respect, Dr. Akua Boateng, licensed psychotherapist here in the city of Philadelphia with her own practice. Dr. Boateng, it is a pleasure to have you, and welcome to WURD.
It is always a pleasure to talk to you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine, and thanks for, look, I know that I am eating into your day, so I won't be too long, but we were talking about the pressure that Simone Biles is under, the pressure that Naomi Osaka is on, and I introduced the idea that there's a difference between the kind of pressure that these high-profile athletes are on and the kind of pressure that sisters, black women, have been under traditionally in a country that neither respects their blackness nor their femininity. Am I off the beaten path on that one?
You are not off the beaten path at all. I think that what Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka teach us is that, number one, our mental health is the most important thing because it is the ground with which we do everything in life, right? Historically, unfortunately, for black women, we have a socialization, an idea that we should hold our pain and not express it. We should push through our suffering instead of raise our hand and say, I am in need of help. I am not okay. But what they do in their stance towards self-care is to say, I raise my hand and I say, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to humanize black women and our experience and the pain that we go through. And it's not only is it important, it's important enough to stop any expectations that a person has upon us.
Well, what do you say to individuals who would come forward and say, okay, when a mother gets up and goes to work 5 o'clock in the morning, comes home at 5 o'clock at night, has kids to take care of, you know, she can't just stand up and say, look, you know, I quit kids, I quit motherhood,
Right.
And what do you say when someone compares that to the fact that a person is making millions of dollars to play a sport? They signed up and so forth. And, you know, the idea is, well, today I just don't feel up to it. And I think that that's acceptable, but is it comparable?
In some way, you know, playing a sport is not cannot be compared to taking care of children, keeping people alive, right, which mothers do on a daily basis. And that's obviously not something you can opt out of. However, when you are in contract as an athlete, you're contracted in the event, or you're contracted to have a healthy body, to have the capacity to do your job. And so when you're not able to do your job, when you are not well enough to be able to execute what is set out before you, in some way you get to say, I can't, right? There's a little bit of privilege there that we're talking about. Obviously, it can't be compared to the everyday stresses that people are under. However, there's a unique compounded stress that athletes are under that require not only their physical capacity, but a toughness and a mental grit that Simone Biles said she just did not have.
We're speaking with Dr. Akua Boateng, who practices psychotherapy here in the city of Philadelphia. I don't know if I like the term practices. She's really good at it, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get past the practice stage. She's really good at it. And before she takes leave of us, we'll make sure that you get the number just in case you find yourself facing some challenges. You might need some assistance. But when I look at someone like a Simone Biles, a Naomi Osaka, they are playing at the highest level, and they go beyond simply being another human being. They become a thing. They become an icon. They become, quote, a star. How unhealthy is it for us to live in a world where we make people into these demigods, these superhuman beings, just so that we can watch them fall from their pedestal?
And some of that, I think, is conscious and unconscious, right? That in some way, historically, as a society, we often gain something from being able to look up to something, someone, some icon. It gives us some structure within our society that that motivates us, that we thrive upon. However, it can be really harmful for the actual human that has been idealized, right? And because they're set up for failure, they are frail. They are finite. They do not have the capacity to go beyond their limits. And so it creates a scenario that dehumanizes them. It creates a scenario that Simone Biles is in now when she says, I actually can't. There are many people now that want to throw stones at her because that was not a part of the idol. That was not a part of the package, the Wheaties box, anything that I learned about you. Your humanity was not a part of that. And so now I really want to banish you because you turned out not to be this idol that I thought you were. And so it's really unhealthy, obviously, for the athlete, but it's also unhealthy for everyday people that may not be able to humanize their own experience when they're going through pain, when they're going through mental health challenges, which are worthy enough for them to stop, pause, and to recover as well.
Let's take that into the normal person's life. I mean, right now, there are people listening to you. Some of them are getting off appointment, or
Even when we want to do that, we want to quit. We come to our limits and we want to stop, and yet we can't. But there are ways to take care of yourself, even if they're micro. I call micro ways of taking care of yourself, and that looks like, where possible, where you can sleep, to sleep, and where you can take care of your daily life needs, whether that be going to the doctor, go to the doctor, getting outside to get sunlight, taking a walk, taking the kids off of the PlayStation, off of whatever it is, and taking a walk outside. It regenerates your children. It also regenerates you. Small things, but they are large when it comes to replenishing the spirit and the soul and the body of person that is the caretaker. Reaching out for therapy is a big thing, right? When you're going through stress, do you have a place where you can express that, talk about it, process it, and not just sit in it? If you're not able to get to therapy, do you have people that you rely on and talk to on a weekly or biweekly basis that you can, whether it's a girlfriend or a pastor or someone in your life that you can de-stress with? These things are valuable and really help you to persevere when you feel like you want to give up.
Last but not least, or almost last but not least, you are in the field of helping human beings to deal with the pressures of life. Over the last year and a half, we have faced some unusual, unexpected pressures. Are you finding people are becoming more willing nowadays to acknowledge their brokenness, acknowledge their need for help? Or are we becoming more entrenched in our self-protection and acting like we are still Iron John?
That's a really good question. I seem to believe that based on what I'm seeing in the public, based on what I'm seeing in my office, based on what I'm hearing, the pandemic really humanized our experience. It let us, right? It gave us this opportunity to really look at our lives and what is happening, what is essential and what is not essential. One of those things is our mental health. If we didn't have the capacity, we found out really quick that we were not able to move forward.
Yeah, that's true.
More people are pursuing therapy in the past year globally than at any other time. And so I think we are increasing our sensitivity to the impact of our mental health on our daily life and our family and our relationships. Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka are really just our public figures, but they speak to the microcosm of our society. And at this point, we're really more likely, more open with saying, I have limits. I must speak them. I am human.
Well, we'll tie a string in it right there for the time being. We've been speaking with Dr. Akua Boateng. She is a licensed psychotherapist with a practice right here in the city of Philadelphia. People are listening to you right now saying, I might just need some help, but if you are like the rest of the therapists that I know, you are probably up to your eyeballs with clients these days. So I don't know if you even want to give a number where people can reach you, but is there a way that they can either follow you online or call you if they might need some help?
Yes, of course. I always field phone calls, even if I am booked at the moment. It's at akuakboateng.com, AKUAKBOATENG.com is my website, and on all platforms, social platforms, it's Akua K. Boateng. And my email is also info@akuakboateng.com.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it from lips that are much more expert than mine. Dr. Boateng, I appreciate not only what you did for us today, but what you are doing throughout the city of Philadelphia to help people do even better if they're doing well, and if they're not doing well, to get the help that they need so that they can have good mental health. Thanks for all that you do, and I hope that you have a real pleasant Wednesday evening.
Thank you. Thank you for shining light on it. It's really important.
I appreciate it, good sister. Thank you. Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, maybe I'll back off of it a little bit. Just a little. Just a little. You know, these sisters, Simone Biles, she's been practicing for, and listen, I can get it. She's been practicing for the last 4 years to be ready for the Olympics, you know, winning contest. And then the Olympics come and then they go because of the coronavirus, and another year passes and we're having the 2020 Olympics in 2021. She's under deep stress. I get that. I get it. She's under very deep stress. Naomi Osaka begged out of the French Open, I do believe. The reason she begged out is she said she didn't want to have to do the interviews. I can get to that. You know, sitting in front of a bunch of people asking you the same questions that you've heard 100 times over the last week or two can be annoying. I get that. In the case of Simone Biles, she trained with her team. She was the leader of her team. Everybody knew it. It was a role that she accepted and embraced. And I guess it got to her. And that's just being human. But I'm thinking that it isn't quite fair to compare that to the normal workaday stresses that the typical black woman goes through on a regular basis in a nation where her blackness nor her womanhood is respected and appreciated as it ought be. 215-634-8065. Derek in North Philly, you're up next. Thank you for the call and welcome to the show.
Love, peace, blessing, and prosperity. Nick, how are you?
I'm good, sir. Good to have you on.
Right on. Thank you, Nick. Nick, I think you're a little bit off today with the comment on stress. And I say that because, Nick, you sound like a person who paid a ticket to go see a concert and the artist that was supposed to perform got sick and didn't.
Okay. I'll take that. I take your point. Did I lose you, Derek?
No, I'm still here, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not disappointed that she didn't perform. I think she did the wisest thing. You know, don't hurt yourself. I'm not disappointed. I am taking to task not Simone Biles. I am taking to task people who rushed to her rescue saying, see what black women have to go through, all the stress. I am saying that that's a different scenario. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Well, it sounds it sounds indifferent to what the reality of stress is, and I understand better why you would say that, but it still is out of place because you know when an athlete trains that vigorously to get to a apex in their career, you know, and then tragically they have to bow out. That's very stressful. Something was wrong enough for her to get to that pinnacle and to call it off. I think that we need to applaud her because to me she showed wisdom over money and fame.
But Derek, may I ask you, are you hearing me say that she should not be applauded?
What I'm saying is that it sounds as though in the comparison that you're giving, it sounds like you're insensitive. And when someone is stressed, no matter what their occupation is, there's no room for insensitivity because of
well, you know, I stand to be corrected, and I appreciate you saying it, but help me. What did I say that is insensitive?
I think the way it came off sounding to me insensitive, that you would even compare a working woman to an athlete. I don't think that's, to me, it's like tomatoes and apples and oranges. Stress, no matter what occupation, I don't think it should be put on a degree of level of occupation as to say, well, this person should get more attention for their stress level than the athlete. I think that when it comes to stress, it's an individual thing. And if a person individually feel that they can't do their job, whether they're a mother, whether they're a truck driver, whether they're a skyscraper worker, something is wrong because everybody has to be responsible. An athlete has to be responsible. A mother has to be responsible. So we all have to be responsible. And I take it that she's a responsible person. Maybe, Nick, if she would have got up there, maybe she would have broken her neck coming down or something. Something was wrong.
mean, I want to make sure, I mean, and I'm taking what you're offering here. I just want to make sure, because if I'm being insensitive, I want to correct that. You're hearing me say that she wasn't under stress, or are you hearing me say that she doesn't deserve our empathy or sympathy? Is that what you're hearing?
I'm hearing what you said, the latter, that when you give a comparison to, that's where it sounds sensitive to. when you give a comparison to a working woman or a comparison to anybody.
Oh, okay. So, all right, I got you. Well, Derek, I appreciate your offering that, because I'm certainly not trying. Look, man, I appreciate your offering. I'm certainly not trying to do that. Let me see if we can squeeze another call in before we take our break. Let's go to Miss T in Overbrook. Miss T, thank you for your call and welcome to the show.
Hi, Nick. How you doing?
I don't know.
Well, so let me just put my 2 cents in.
All righty.
I did not hear you. You did not sound insensitive. It sounded like, I think somebody's missing the point. It sounded like you're saying stress can come at any level.
I thought I was saying that.
And I'm going to tell you another thing. You helped me. It was a couple years ago. I was having a dilemma. And you told me to write down the positive and the negative. And that, you gave me direction. So you don't know whose life you're touching, but you touched mine, and thank you.
Well, Ms. T, that is just so very kind of you to put that little feather in the little cap that I'm trying to wear right now.
Yeah, but you do, don't you? You normally do that, because I know you've been a counselor and all. And I think I had called you, and you called me back. I was floored. So you helped me doing whatever I was going through. But, yes, just because somebody, like money and all that, doesn't mean a darn thing. If I don't have my health, I can't get other things. And I have my physical health and my mental health. And if I don't have my mental health, that physical health starts to go, too.
Quickly, very quickly.
She probably felt really overwhelmed, and maybe she's going through something with her boyfriend. She has a new little relationship going on.
Yeah, she is dating a football player.
Exactly. So we don't know. We as women, we just react differently. Like if we're having personal problems and all, sometimes we can't do the things that we need to do for the public. So we need to have self-care, and it's a shame that she's out in the public and all that, but too bad. She needs to have self-care like she's doing. She needs to just take it and own it, and that's what she's doing. So
step back and give yourself a breather.
That has gone through some things, this is how I feel about life. But Nick, again, I want to thank you. You have been really a help to me. You know, at different times you have been. And
I am so grateful to know that is the case, and I wish you all the best. And if the need ever arises, reach out again, and I'll do whatever I can.
Well, you remember the VA?
Yes, I do. I do. Yes, I do remember that. That's who you are. Okay,
it's me again.
Oh yeah, that was a precious time for me. My mother was there. Miss T, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Take care.
All righty. Let's squeeze one more call in. Coming along at 5:30, ladies and gentlemen, we shift gears. We're going to be talking about the very pivotal subject of disease, infection, vaccines, all of those things that come combining, particularly in the light and in the context of a nation that mistreated a group of black men known as the Tuskegee Experiment. We will be joined by two individuals who are going to break down for us the issue of epidemiology, disease control, in the context of a society where black people have the right to be suspicious. But let's go to Tony real quick before we take our break. Welcome, Tony.
Hello, Nick. Thanks for taking my call. Nick,
sure enough.
One thing I know about being black in America, don't care how much money you got, how many gold medals you got, how fast you can run, how good you play basketball, how many differential equations being black in America carries the same stress. Serena Williams, can you imagine the stress she went through? She know they didn't like her. No, it's the same stress for all of us being black in America. And Simone is on top. She got a right to say, I'm not feeling right with the pandemic and the racially motivated things going on. This stress is too much. I can't think. I'm off kilter. And so she pulled out. Like Naomi Osaka said, realized, I'm on top. This racially motivated stress in this tennis game all the time, I don't have to go through this. I'm me. I'm on top. And now it comes to find out that this insurrection, come to find out, is really the bottom line to it was racially motivated. It was the policemen crying, the brothers being called N-words. That was the whole thing, man. Being black, Sigmund Freud and them, they don't, psychoanalysts never was black. They can't psychoanalyze what it means to be black in America. We know, you know, don't care how much money you got or nothing, but you understand that stress. And that's all I have to say. Peace.
Well, you said enough. You said a mouthful. That's why we had a black psychotherapist on to talk about it. Well, I guess, ladies and gentlemen, that Eric and I just have to back away from. No, I'm not. No, I still think that it is a different kettle of fish. That's all I'm saying. That it's different. I'm only saying that it is different. And we'll take a break now. But when a sister says, "I can't take it anymore. I can't take it," and she knows that when she doesn't go to work, that her children might not eat that week. It's different from somebody saying, "I don't want to play this tennis tournament, but of course, I'll cash those $6 million checks from the endorsers who still endorse me." That is a different kind of situation. That's all that one man is trying to say. Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Dr. Celine Gounder, and we'll be talking about
not yet. We're going to go through the episode first, Nick, because I know we're jumping ahead, and I know you would love to have the
well, when I say
on.
introduce, I meant introduce her through the podcast.
Oh, okay. I'm just making sure, Granddad.
Oh, hey, man, I'm just trying
to take away people's rights of like taking mental health days.
I'm reading the sheet that my producer gave me.
Hey, listen, man, I don't know, man. You just, you be over here like people can't take mental health days and then jumping up ahead of some stuff, man.
I need a mental health day. I'm losing it.
I mean,
when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, though, you will be listening to a podcast that introduces the topic, the very sensitive topic, of how black people have been mistreated in the name of medical care and how black bodies are often experimented on. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to Evening Words with Nick, and we'll be back after these messages.
Now,
good afternoon. Watch for an
update on WURD Radio.
For an accident on the PA Turnpike westbound between Ben Salem and Willow Grove. We've got the two right lanes blocked. The area is jammed. We've got some slow going on the Turnpike eastbound as well between Norristown and Mid-County. 476, the Blue Route backs up northbound between 95 and McDade Boulevard, and southbound we jam up between St. David's, Villanova, and Media Swarthmore. Schuylkill Expressway eastbound side heavy. Boulevard to the Vine Expressway. Westbound backs up University Avenue all the way to Montgomery Drive. 95 jamming up northbound Columbus Boulevard to Bridge Street. And we've got some delays on the Vine Expressway eastbound 76 to 95 and westbound 8th to the Schuylkill Expressway. Report brought to you by America's Best Contacts and Eyeglasses. Don't overpay for glasses. Get 2 pairs and a free exam for just $69.95. The exam alone is worth $50. That's not just a better deal, it's America's best. Book your exam online today. In certain states, eye exams provided by independent ophthalmologists. See stores for details. And for more traffic information, log on to sigalert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
A Night of Passion makes a married doctor question his assumptions about love, lust, and monogamy. In The Marriage Pass, a tale of domestic suspense from Brianna Cole, smart, sexy, and filled with drama. The Marriage Pass explores the boundaries of a relationship by taking the what if of a free pass. One partner's consequence-free night with their greatest temptation to a new level. Pick up your copy of The Marriage Pass by Brianna Cole today, everywhere where books are sold. And for more information, visit BriannaCole.com. That's BriannaCole.com.
The WURD Radio Newsletter, keeping you informed, engaged, and connected. Sign up by visiting WURDRadio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and type your email address under Connect with Us. You'll receive the latest information on WURD Radio, messages from our president and CEO, Sarah Lomax Reese, exclusive articles and multimedia content, and resources. Stay informed with the WURD Radio Newsletter. WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at ForWord. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Hey folks, here at WURD, we get the privilege of introducing you to people who can give you information that not only will help your life, but sometimes save your life. And today we have the sublime privilege of introducing you to our friends from Just Human Productions in the form of Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington. We want to start by sharing with you a podcast called Epidemic, Season 1, Episode 68. And we're sharing it with you because it presents to you the stunning and scary reality of how black bodies have been experimented with, mistreated, misunderstood, misapprehended. We'll be speaking with Dr. Celine Gounder and with Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble after this podcast, but pay attention to the nuances of all of the things that have happened over the years and some of the experiments that have taken place. They will be joined by other guests like Harriet Washington and Reuben Warren. But ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the first episode, season 1 rather, episode 68 of Epidemic with Dr. Celine Gounder. Stay with us.
I've been explaining for these 13 years that the Tuskegee study is not at all the reason why African Americans are, quote, afraid of the medical research system.
We have to take people's fears seriously and try to figure out what is going on there.
Welcome back to Epidemic, the podcast about the science, public health, and social impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. I'm your host, Dr. Celine Gounder. In the late 1990s, Vanessa Gamble was giving a talk one day at the University of Illinois.
I must admit I was a bit stressed out. It was the day before I was to get my tenure decision.
Turns out Vanessa didn't have anything to worry about. She got tenure at the University of Wisconsin. And today, Vanessa Gamble is a professor of medical humanities at George Washington University. But back then, she was at the start of her academic career. It was the height of the HIV epidemic, and the African American community was hard hit by the AIDS crisis. In 1993, HIV became the leading cause of death in African Americans aged 25 to 44. It would stay that way until 1996, when highly active antiretroviral therapy for HIV became widely available.
So I'm giving this talk, and I talked about how there were African Americans, some African Americans who believed that HIV was introduced in the African American community.
Vanessa didn't think this was true, but as a physician and expert on the history of race in American medicine, she understood why some did. She laid out the reasons why this belief was so common in the African American community.
This is why I think some African Americans believe it. Their housing is poor, they can't get a job, and all of a sudden, the government is there to want their blood, and in case of COVID, give them vaccines. So what's going on here?
But her take wasn't well received.
So a student gets up and says, "You're an MD, PhD. You know that this is being introduced in our neighborhood." And I basically told him why I did not believe it, but I understood why he did.
Then the former dean of the medical school stood up to confront her too.
And he said, "You're an MD, PhD. Like, at that point I said, "Yes, I do know that." And he said, "How could you even bring this up in an academic talk?"
That student didn't want to hear Vanessa debunking myths about HIV being introduced into African American communities. But the dean didn't want to hear about the very real fears in the African American community either.
And so here you have two sides arguing, but not talking to each other.
This divide is not a new development. Many look to one event as the source of this distrust.
In the 1990s, there was a lot of discussion about HIV/AIDS and the African American community and the syphilis study.
The study Vanessa is talking about is the United States Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee. If you've only heard about one case of medical malfeasance, it's probably this one. The U.S. federal government withheld treatment from Black men with syphilis for decades. This study has become the go-to example for the sort of institutional wrongdoing that has made many Black Americans so dubious of medical professionals.
And at the time, it was widely believed that because of the syphilis study, that African Americans would not participate in clinical trials, that African Americans would not take particular medications against HIV/AIDS.
Today, in the age of COVID, these same assumptions are still being made about African Americans. As vaccines roll out across the country, understanding the reasons for distrust is more important now than ever. Black Americans are twice as likely to die from COVID as white Americans. Despite this, polls show that African Americans are less interested in receiving the vaccine than other groups, though it's important to note that those numbers are improving. For people of color who do want the vaccine, inequities in U.S. healthcare are making access to vaccines more difficult. But assuming the syphilis experiment is the only reason why some African Americans are undecided about the vaccine ignores hundreds of years of medical history, as well as racism in the present day. This is the third episode in our series on vaccine confidence. To get a fuller picture of the African American experience with vaccines and public health, we're going to look at the history of medical experimentation on Black people.
So that underscoring this study was this idea that Black bodies were different.
How this legacy carries on to the present day.
These are really troublesome changes we've made that serve to erode informed consent.
And what lessons we can learn from these mistakes to help get more people vaccinated.
If you've got a history of a system that has disproportionately disaffected a population, then why would they feel comfortable in participating in anything to benefit that population?
Today on Epidemic, trustworthiness and the Black experience of American medicine. The history of experimentation on Black Americans dates all the way back to slavery. People who owned slaves would use them to study the human body.
Dr. John Kinney, who was Booker T. Washington's physician, he said that there needed to be a monument for African Americans for their contributions to surgery, who contributed through what he called the guinea pig route.
Many of these doctors wrote at length about their experiments on enslaved people. They were lauded for their discoveries, but their means were barbaric. J. Marion Sims was one of these doctors. Widely regarded as the father of gynecology, Sims experimented extensively on enslaved women. He tested new surgical techniques on these women without anesthesia.
These women went through these unbearable experiments. J. Marion Sims talks about how, one of them, their pain was so intense, I thought she was going to die.
Doctors experimenting on unwilling patients, it was a real-life horror film. Even after slavery was outlawed, this distrust of medical professionals in the African American community became deeply ingrained.
There were, beliefs, strong beliefs, that these figures called night doctors would take you to the hospital to experiment.
This wasn't far-fetched. At the time, it was commonplace for Black cemeteries to be vandalized. Bodies were dug up in the middle of the night and sold to medical schools, many in the North, to teach medical students anatomy.
It was a folk belief, so it might not be quote-unquote true, but people believed it and they acted on it, and it contributed to their sentiments towards the medical profession.
And this exploitation of Black bodies for the sake of medicine didn't just stop after the turn of the 20th century. It simply took another form.
Well, I was born in Macon County, Alabama, which is Tuskegee.
That was the voice of George Key in 2002. He was a participant in the Tuskegee syphilis study.
First time we went, there was 3 or 4 of us went together, and they just some kind of milk, something like milk to swallow. And I don't know what that been so long. I don't even know what that was for.
Alongside almost 600 other black men, George was recruited when he was in his 30s as part of a study that had a powerful sponsor.
This was a study that went for 40 years that was conducted by the United States Public Health Syphilis Study.
The United States Public Health Service started the study in 1932 in Macon County, Alabama. The goal of the experiment was to observe what untreated syphilis would do to the body.
Many times people want to look at the syphilis study as a violation of research ethics. That is a part of the story. But another part of the story is this idea that black bodies were inherently different than white bodies.
Syphilis was a deadly sexually transmitted disease. Untreated, it caused sores and ulcers, and eventually it could spread to other parts of the body, even the heart, blood vessels, eyes, the brain, and the spinal cord. It could cause weakness, abnormal, unsteady gaits, loss of coordination, dementia, and much more. When the study began in the 1930s, there was a treatment for syphilis, a toxic combination of arsenic and bismuth or mercury. This treatment was withheld. And when a far better treatment came along in the 1940s, penicillin, a more effective and safe treatment, that too was withheld from these men.
I think it's very important for people to know that this was not a hidden study.
Over the course of 4 decades, the men were given placebos and told that they were effective treatments for syphilis. The United States Public Health Service made sure that even if these men went to other doctors, they would still not receive treatment.
There was a series of medical and public health articles in prominent journals which talked about the syphilis study. So it was well known in the medical community.
The study was hiding in plain sight. And then in 1972, an employee of the United States Public Health Service leaked the story to a reporter, and a national outcry shut the study down. The surviving members of the study, people like George Key, received a $10 million out-of-court settlement, but the U.S. government did not admit to any wrongdoing.
So a group of us met at Tuskegee in 1996 to discuss getting a presidential apology for the victims of the syphilis study. I got to become chair because I had the biggest mouth in the room.
In 1997, the committee successfully campaigned for then President Clinton to apologize.
We can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
The public apology was a victory, but even Vanessa acknowledges it was mostly symbolic.
Has it done a lot? Probably not. But it did do something for the men and their families. And I think we sometimes think of them in the abstract. But to have President Clinton say, I am sorry to the men who were able to come and the men who were, and their families who were in Macon County, brought to bear that these were human beings who needed and should have been apologized to by their government.
In the wake of the United States Public Health Service study at Tuskegee, new guidelines were issued to prevent a similar incident from taking place. But that hasn't been enough. Harriet Washington is a writer whose work focuses on medical ethics.
It is not only the historical abuse, but also the contemporary abuse.
We'll hear how a recent study echoes Tuskegee in more ways than one, and what the medical establishment can do to earn trust and make itself more trustworthy. That's after the break.
All right, good people, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be rejoined by Dr. Celine Gounder, and then after the podcast has concluded, we'll embark upon a conversation with Dr. Gounder and also with our other guests to talk more about the establishment of trustworthiness when it comes to medical care and about some of the suspicions and how they were founded when it comes to the African American community. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Now, a traffic update on WURD Radio.
Good afternoon. Watch for an accident now on 95 northbound at Broad Street. We've got the right lane blocked and delays are going back to Island Avenue. Elsewhere, more volume on 95 northbound Columbus Boulevard to Bridge Street. We've got some delays on the Vine Expressway. Westbound side, disabled vehicle cleared out of the way between the Parkway and the Schuylkill, but delays go back to 95. Eastbound, we back up 76 to 95. Schuylkill Expressway, eastbound side, heavy Boulevard to the Vine. We also back up on the westbound side, University Avenue to Montgomery Drive. Accident on the PA Turnpike westbound between Ben Salem and Willow Grove. We've got the two right lanes blocked there. An accident in Plymouth Township, Germantown Pike at Plymouth Road. Report brought to you by America's Best Contacts and Eyeglasses. Don't overpay for glasses. Get 2 pairs and a free exam for just $69.95. The exam alone is worth $50. That's not just a better deal, it's America's Best. Book your exam online today. In certain states, eye exams provided by independent ophthalmologists. See stores for details. And for more traffic information, log on to sigalert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
So many times we say to ourselves, I need to make a difference. Well, your chance is here. Center in the Park is holding a virtual volunteer event Friday, August 6, 2021 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Advocate for those who can't, support those who can, and ensure all long-term care residents live with dignity and respect. Register for this Ombudsman event at info@centerinthepark.org. We all feel better when we do something that matters and when we do something with purpose.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Want the latest in WURD swag? Check out the shop tab on WURDradio.com. Hoodies, tees, and more in a variety of colors. The shop tab on WURDradio.com. Show the world that you're all about black. Talk Media. This is not a fad for us.
We will not resume our regular programming when things die down. We're not black to help our bottom line or because it's politically correct. We're not joining a fight. This has been our fight, our message, our people. Black lives have always mattered here. We are
undeniably,
indefatigably, unapologetically, permanently black. Talk Media.
WURD. WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at ForWord. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
13 minutes away from the hour of 6 o'clock, and you are listening not only to Evening Words, but you're listening to a podcast called Epidemic. It's Season 1, Episode 68, and it prepares us for the conversation that we'll be having after the 6 o'clock break with our two special guests, Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. Stay with us, folks. We return you now to the podcast, Epidemic.
For many African Americans, it's not the fear of vaccines themselves that define their skepticism. It's a general distrust of a system that for so long has not worked in their favor.
People are avoiding it because they have sometimes very logical reasons for not trusting it.
This is Harriet Washington. She wrote Medical Apartheid and Carte Blanche about the past and present of medical racism in American medicine. In Carte Blanche, she wrote about an experiment that involved polyheme. Polyheme is a red blood cell substitute that works by carrying oxygen to tissues throughout the body.
So around 2005, 2006, Northfield Laboratories, the maker of polyheme, wanted to have it tested and get FDA approval so they could market this and sell it. And the military also wanted it to be approved so they could use it for soldiers.
The Polyheme study took place in some 24 cities across the United States in the mid-2000s. The goal of the study was to observe if Polyheme could be used in an emergency for trauma patients when there was no blood on hand for transfusion. But there was a problem.
They tested it on urban streets with everyday Americans, but they did it without getting their permission. There was no informed consent. There was not even any simple consent. They simply put it on ambulances.
If you were a trauma patient in a participating city, you were automatically enrolled in the study. And all of this was completely legal. In 1996, the FDA made emergency research exempt from informed consent requirements.
The law was a change to the Code of Federal Regulations that regulates human medical experimentation. And it lays out the conditions under which a researcher can enroll someone in their research study without asking their permission and without telling them about it.
The rationale was that trauma victims are often unconscious and cannot give their consent. But this is a big assumption. Eventually, the study's organizers told residents they could opt out of the study. All they had to do was wear a bracelet.
The study was inundated with requests from people who wanted bracelets. But the study said it ran out of bracelets. And you know how long it took them to get a supply of bracelets in? 1 year.
There were other issues, too. Researchers did not randomly select participants. They were very intentional about where they conducted the study.
The ambulances that were chosen to carry the Polyheme were those that only serviced areas of the city that were Black and Hispanic. So research studies are often designed in order to recruit only people of color, but that's not explicitly stated. You will not know that unless you examine the data.
And worst of all, Polyheme wasn't saving lives.
In the end, they analyzed the data and found out that people that got the artificial blood, people who got Polyheme, were more likely to have a heart attack or to die.
Just like in Tuskegee, these people were not given the opportunity to make an informed decision about whether or not to participate in these experiments, and the results of that were fatal for some.
This means that people were sickened and died in research study that they never gave their permission to be in, that they never knew that they were in.
The Tuskegee and Polyheme studies are just two examples in a long history of mistreatment. And that history and the present of medical racism in medicine are impacting some people's willingness to get vaccinated. Understanding all of these factors is important, but focusing solely on the Black people who don't get vaccinated ignores the fact that there are many who do. Here's Vanessa Gamble again.
You hear people saying, I did it because I wanted to protect my grandmother. I did it because I heard that Black people are dying more from COVID-19, and I wanted to do my part. If we keep talking about, well, Black people don't want the vaccine, that it takes the eye off our really looking into the inequities in terms of distribution.
Harriet says some distribution policies that seem colorblind aren't. Think about the policy that prioritized older Americans first for vaccine access.
Certainly sounds compassionate, certainly sounds right, and yet that policy operates against their getting access to the vaccine because African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Native Americans are all young populations. You look at people over 90 years old, the rate is twice as high among whites as Blacks. There are fewer people in that age group, so fewer African Americans are achieving that priority.
The process to sign up for a vaccine is itself Byzantine and onerous. People with more access to computers, internet, and reliable transportation are more likely to get vaccinated. Harriet says the narrative that Black Americans are skeptical of healthcare and things like vaccines misses the point.
The real problem is the untrustworthiness of the healthcare system. If you don't look at both of these factors, if you only look at African American behavior, you're pathologizing African Americans. The message then becomes it's African Americans who are creating their own problems by refusing access. And that, again, is perpetuation of this old, tendency to blame African Americans for their own diseases. If we make a trustworthy healthcare system, then people will flock to it. We won't have to induce them.
So how can these institutions make themselves more trustworthy? Reuben Warren, a professor of ethics at Tuskegee University, has one idea.
if you shift the conversation from trust to trustworthiness, then the burden of responsibility becomes those who are seeking trust. And then ask the folks you're asking to trust them.
Shifting the conversation means that medical institutions have to participate in an open dialogue with the African American community.
That's a well-established scientific methodology called focus groups. We do them all the time. Then ask the folks, what do they need? What do they feel that you need to do in order to be trustworthy? And they'll tell you. You also have to seek out those organizations, those institutions that have had a history of trustworthiness.
Faith-based organizations and healthcare workers of color can help open the door to these conversations, but they can't do this work on behalf of these medical institutions.
So you have to engage people in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end if you want them to benefit from the work that you're doing.
Harriet says that proving trustworthiness starts with asking for consent.
I always use the example of the IRB system, institutional review boards.
Institutional review boards are intended to review and monitor research involving human subjects. They're supposed to protect the rights and welfare of study participants and to screen for ethical concerns.
So what I proposed in Medical Apartheid is that we should have instead IRBs that are composed half of researchers and scientists and half of people drawn from the subject pool, people who are part of the group who will end up being in the research study or being in the treatment group. Only then can we expect to have any kind of parity.
Institutional review boards that are representative of people being studied would help increase African American participation in clinical trials too. Vanessa Gamble agrees.
You know, I've had relatives saying, well, why should I do this? They only used white people. Does it work on me? Well, I think if you see that Black people are part of the clinical trials, that will help assuage some people's questions and concerns.
One critique of clinical trials has been that there are often no long-term resources for people that take part. Rubin says that we need to change that.
What assurances can you provide that if something, by whatever reason, goes wrong, not in the clinical trials, not in the immediate response to the vaccination, but in the long term, and I have no health insurance, and I'm really left out in the cold. So those kind of assurances, I think, says to the population, we're concerned about not only about the vaccination, but about you as an individual.
And in the instances that those agreements are broken,
there have to be consequences. You see, you can't just say, trust me, when the trust has been violated. And so if there are no consequences to behavior, be it intentional or unintentional, that's inappropriate, then that is likely to repeat itself.
Demonstrating trustworthiness takes time, hard work, and patience, but it can be done.
It's not new. We know what to do. The question is, are we going to do it?
Epidemic is brought to you by Just Human Productions. We're funded in part by listeners like you. We're powered and distributed by Simplecast.
Yes, we are. I tell you, the dialogue's beginning a little quicker than I thought it would. It's 3 minutes away from the hour of 6 o'clock straight up in the city of Philadelphia. When we come back, we will engage in conversation. The two principals of the podcast that you just heard, Dr. Celine Gounder, who is a practicing infectious diseases specialist and internist at the New York University School of Medicine. She's also a member of President-elect Biden's COVID-19 Advisory Board and the host and producer of Epidemic and the American Diagnosis podcast, and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. She is the University Professor of Medical Humanities at the esteemed George Washington University, the first woman and the first African American to hold this prestigious position. She's also Professor of Health Policy and the Milken Institute School of Public Health and Professor of American Studies at the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. And when we get back, we're going to dig deep into the issue of medical care, trust, the Black community, and in the context of the coronavirus, about vaccines and infectious diseases. Stay with us, folks. It gets rich, it gets deep, right after this break.
It's time to break free from whatever screen you've been glued to for the past year. Backs up to get back to all the things you love about Philly. The city is ready for you. Go to ReadySetPhilly.com to plan your triumphant return.
Join WURD for the Summer of Freedom Neighborhood Love Tour. This year, we celebrate West Oak Lane, Mantua, Northwest, and South Philly. I'm Tiffany Bacon, and I'm broadcasting live from a different neighborhood each Friday from 10 a.m. until 12 noon. Our next stop is the J.L. Wright Recreation Center on July 30th. Enjoy live performances, meet special guests, and stand with WURD. Be a part of the movement to amplify the voice of the Black community. Show your support and join or renew your 4WURD membership on site. That's the Summer of Freedom Neighborhood Love Tour at the J.L. Wright Recreation Center from 10 a.m. until 12 noon. WURD. Showing love this summer.
Catch Tiffany Bacon this Friday at the J.L. Wright Recreation Center, 3320 Haverford Avenue. The WURD Radio Neighborhood Love Tour is sponsored by Comcast and supported by Pico, Keystone First, and Ready Set Philly. Be there this Friday at the Summer of Freedom Neighborhood Love Tour as Tiffany Bacon broadcasts live from the J.L. Wright Community Center, 3320 Haverford Avenue, from 10 a.m. till noon, and stand with WURD Radio to amplify voices of the Black community as a digital 4WURD member for as low as $5 per month and receive a free gift for signing up. That's this Friday at the J.L. Wright Community Center, 3320 Haverford Avenue, or visit WURDradio.com. Start or renew your 4WURD membership today. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Black Talk Media. WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at 4WURD. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
The clock looks like a string of spaghetti, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6 o'clock straight up in America's favorite city. Glad that you can join us. Final hour of Evening Words coming along. At 7 o'clock, you check in with the sister that asked you to save space. She is sincerely Sarita. Save space for her, and she will serve up a heaping dollop of all the best in radio expertise from 7 o'clock until 9. But we want to return now to the topic that was introduced to us through the stunning podcast that we just heard. I was so deeply educated by it. I hope that you were as well. Joining us now are the two principal voices that you heard in that podcast. Let me reintroduce them both to you. Dr. Celine Gounder is a practicing physician in infectious diseases and an internist at New York University School of Medicine. She's a member of President-elect Biden's, well, he's a president now, COVID-19 Advisory Board. Boy, do we need that assistance. And the host and producer of the Epidemic and American Diagnosis podcast. She is joined by the other principal voice that you heard that stridently asserted that she was named to a committee because of the volume of her voice. She brings that practice and expert voice to us today. Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble is a university professor of medical humanities at the George Washington University. She is also a professor of health policy at the Milken Institute School of Public Health and professor of American Studies in the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. Says so right here, easy for me to say. Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble, welcome to WRD, and thank you for joining us.
For having.
It's great to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here. We want to thank our friends at Just Human Productions for making this conversation possible at this critical hour in Earth's history where there has to be a level of credibility on the part of medical practitioners, and there has to be a level of trust on the part of those who need treatment. Dr. Gounder, you introduced the topic of reasons for distrust. What led to the production of the podcast Epidemic?
Well, this is something that I launched with Ron Klain, who's now President Biden's chief of staff. We launched this back in late February because we saw what was about to hit the United States, both of us were veterans of prior epidemics and pandemics. I got to know Ron Klain during the Ebola epidemic. At that time, he was President Obama's Ebola czar, and we had crossed paths working in West Africa. And so I could see what was coming, he could see what was coming, and we thought it was really important to get good information to the public about what to expect and how to make sense of all of this.
Dr. Northington Gamble, you spoke early on in the podcast about running into the skepticism of people who thought that diseases were being introduced to the Black community, and you're trying to debunk that. But as the podcast goes on, we get more and more reasons to be suspicious about things. As a medical professional, how do you encounter, how do you get past the wall of natural suspicion that people have?
As you see in the podcast, I don't say people should not be suspicious.
Got you.
I don't say that. And the other thing I try to talk about is that we should not put the burden on Black people. That, I don't talk about distrust, because that puts the burden on Black people. These distrustful Black people, it's become like a genetic trait. Black people are distrustful. But how can our healthcare systems make themselves more trustworthy? And so the other thing I have said is that make sure your questions are answered. Why are you skeptical of vaccines? What are you afraid of? So to make sure that the health professionals take your questions, and your attitudes seriously.
We're in the middle of an evolving pandemic. We dared to believe that we could celebrate a few months ago, but now we're seeing the Delta variant coming, running rampaging through our streets, and now the Lambda variant is standing at the doors knocking and begging for admission. People are still saying, well, you can't trust these vaccines, Dr. Gounder, and you can't trust the people who are administering them to you. And as Dr. Northington Gamble says, they say so with a history behind them. How do we produce the educational tools and the vehicles that people need to be informed and comfortable enough to save their own lives, really?
So, Nick, I'm going to share a story with you. So one of my really good friends, Kaf Jaraza, is a neuroscientist at Duke. And his sister-in-law is Leticia Jaraza, who's the health commissioner in Baltimore. They have a family member who, as they call her, Mama D, who was really reluctant to get vaccinated. And I said to Kaf, I was like, I just want to understand what's going on, why people don't want to get vaccinated. I'm not looking to convince her, I just want to understand. And so he set up a call for me to talk to her. And over the course of an hour, I just asked her lots of questions. I wanted to understand what was her experience with the healthcare system, what was her experience living in Baltimore, what was her experience with vaccines before, and what was her life like during the pandemic. And over the course of that hour, she started to ask me questions. I didn't volunteer information. She just started to ask. And at the end, she just thanked me. And then maybe an hour later, Kaf called me and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "What do you mean? What did I do?" He said, "She's going to get vaccinated." And, and it was amazing because I actually did not set out with that in mind. It was more, I was just trying to understand better her thought process and how people were feeling about this. And I am by no means some vaccine whisperer. I wouldn't pretend to be that. But, I think the key thing here, though, is to really just spend time listening, to let people tell you their story, where they're coming from. Don't try to force it on them. I think for a lot of people, it's going to take time and more than one conversation, and it's not going to happen instantaneously, and to be patient with that. I think what's really frustrating me now, I feel like some people are blaming people who are still unvaccinated. They're getting angry with people who are unvaccinated, and that's a problem.
Well, the president's gotten angry up in New York. They're saying that you have to become vaccinated if you want to work in certain positions. And, we in America, we get really good at blaming. But let's get back to the profession itself. Dr. Northington Gamble, you wear two hats. You are an academician, and you are also a medical doctor. You wear both hats, and you have to educate people and get them prepared. Suspicion is the natural province of people who have been disenfranchised and disempowered. Right. And you tell the stories, and both of you in the podcast we just heard, J. Marion Sims, the father of modern gynecology, and the cruel experiments he did, the syphilis study conducted at Tuskegee, the polyheme study. How do you convince people, or let me ask the question differently, should we perceive that the medical field has now grown to the place where these type of hypocritical, perverse approaches to Black bodies has changed? Should we believe that now?
I think it has evolved, but I want to go back to something else about vaccines, and then I'll get back to this question.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that it's going to take a lot of efforts, and that for some people, having medical professionals be the messenger is not the right thing. I think that there are so many reasons why people might not want vaccines. I have a friend who is another Girls High girl, whose son is a hip hop artist in Oakland. And he is working with Black men to talk about vaccines. He can do that in a way much better than I can. So that I think there's going to be taking a lot of messengers. And this week, Robert Moses died. And when Robert Moses, he was talking about that he was not a leader. He was a community organizer. And I think this is the time where we need to also depend on community organizers and people who can organize and work with people in the communities. And you mentioned that I'm an academician, I'm a historian of medicine, I'm a physician, but also I'm a West Philadelphian. And I understand what it is to go to a hospital when I grew up in West Philadelphia, where they did not treat you with the same respect as they did white patients. So that I think that is important to acknowledge this. And also, I think medicine has evolved, but if you look at statistics, Black people still die at a higher rate than white people for various reasons.
Quick question, just dovetailing with your comments there. You are a proud Black woman, a member of the West Philadelphia community by birth and origin, but you wear a white coat. Which one speaks more loudly when you approach your patients?
I mean, when I was practicing, it was both. I mean, I can't, in a sense, I can't separate out the two. I mean, that I come into medicine being a Black woman, and also depends on what audiences that I'm talking to. There's certain audiences that having had an MD, PhD is important, and there's others where people know that I will listen to their story with respect. I might not agree with them, but coming from a particular background, I think that I can ask particular questions and also listen, for certain things.
We're speaking with Dr. Celine Gounder and with Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. This was all presaged by our listening to the podcast Epidemic, and we're talking, of course, about medical treatment and how it intersects with providing health care to the African American community. We've talked about the Tuskegee experiment, the polyheme study, and now we're talking about vaccines in this age when vaccines are so critical and so important. I'm wondering, Dr. Gounder, as we're trying to get more of the public vaccinated, are we still running into the fears based on some of the things we heard about in the podcast, or are we running into the new fears, the novel fears of this vaccine hasn't been properly studied and vetted? I mean, is it, or a little bit of both?
Nick, I think it's a little bit of both. I think what you're hearing in the current language is really an echo or reflection of the previous experience. And so when people say, you know, how can I trust the vaccine? It's too new, and those kinds of things. It's really reflective of a larger distrust of the system. And frankly, you know, as Vanessa said, yes, the healthcare system has evolved. It is not perfect still. There was an even more recent study involving training nurse practitioners on colonoscopies at Johns Hopkins, where the Polyheme study was based out of. And there was clearly a racial skew in terms of who were the study participants. You know, to quote or paraphrase Ibram X. Kendi, it's not just what is your intent, but what is the result of your policies, your approach. And if the result, even if it's not what you intend, if the result is racist, there is still racism in the healthcare system. And so that unfortunately is alive and well. And I think people have very good reason to have questions. You know, Mama D said to me, how do I know that the vaccine I am being given is the vaccine you're being given? You know, that's the level of distrust in the system.
Let's talk a little bit more about the solutions that were mentioned. One of them, institutional review boards. And I've been around a lot of hospitals, and I've worked in government. I must admit that I haven't heard a lot about institutional review boards. Dr. Northington Gamble, in your studies and in your teaching, are all hospitals doing this? Are they all incorporating these kind of boards with the teeth that allow you to take people to task if they're not doing what they promised?
One of the problems with the institutional review board system is that if you've seen one institutional board, you've seen one institutional review board. That they are varied. And it depends on the institution, it depends who's on it. And that's part of the problem, you know, with the institutional review board system. And then one of the things that, you know, I think is important to get across, and I think it has also, when we talk about the institutional review board, the status of institutional review board, is looking at many of these issues at the local level. So that, you know, one of the things that I have been pushing back a lot on is when people would say, oh, Black people don't want vaccines because of the syphilis study. And it was always, everything is the syphilis study. You know, I have studied the syphilis study. It's not all about the syphilis study. And that, you know, I think is a certain type of laziness to say it's, you know, trying to work out what's going on. So let's take, you know, my alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, you know, where I was even born, that it, you know, if Black people in West Philadelphia have concerns about Penn, it has less to do with the syphilis study and more to do about the remains of the people from MOVE. It has more to do with the fact that the Penn police were with the Philadelphia police when 52nd Street were tear gassed. So that you have to look at also what's happening at the local level and not just be lazy and say it's the syphilis study.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a good opportunity for you to ply my two esteemed guests with your questions and your comments. You know, I have to make sure that I don't think too hard or too long about the qualifications of my guest, or I might go somewhere and run. We are in the presence of real expertise medically when we talk about our guest, Dr. Salim Gounder. It comes to us by way of New York University School of Medicine and Bellevue Hospital Center. She is a disease detective and epidemiologist, and also the host and producer of the Epidemic and American Diagnosis podcast. And we are joined by Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. She is the University Professor of Medical Humanities at the George Washington University and the first woman, an African American, to hold this prestigious endowed faculty position. We'll take your calls at 215-634-8065. That's 215-634-8065. And you get an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to do what you can't do anywhere else, and that is to ask questions without having to get a bill at the end while talking to two highly esteemed medical professionals. 215-634-8065. First call up comes from Winfield. Woody, thank you for your call, and welcome to our conversation with Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been educated quite a bit here, Nick, and I can only tell you that I know you have as well.
Absolutely.
I didn't think you were going to ever stop asking questions, but anyway. I understand.
I love my people from Philadelphia.
I understand. Well,
tell the host to shut up, okay?
If you're from Philly, you might know where my shop is at Bryn Mawr in Lebanon, Woody's Barbershop. I've been here for a lot of years. And if you're from West Philly, you probably do know.
I do.
I am
plug.
No, well, I'm just saying, I'm so happy and proud of you two young ladies. I just want you to know that. I interviewed a doctor by the name of Dr. Suzanne Delamonte. She's out of Cornell University, and I think Dr. Oz interviewed her first. And of course, my little younger brother Nate said she's not going to come on your little program and get interviewed, and she did after I talked with her about 5 minutes. But I was really privileged for that. If you get a chance to check her out, she discovered what diabetes 3 is. Have you do you know about diabetes 3?
I don't, but maybe.
Well, let me share with you so that here it is, Nick. You get a chance to learn some more.
Well, Dr. Gounder was shaking her head in the affirmative.
She does know. Okay. Okay. What is it?
Yeah, no, but tell us. Share your story with us.
Yes, ma'am. She discovered by accident in the laboratory. She was working on the animals, and she went straight to the human studies after she discovered that the very medicine but the drug she was giving the animal to give it diabetes. She found that that same chemical is in a lot of the fast foods. Now, what has happened is this chemical causes the brain to have insulin resistance, and by giving the brain insulin resistance, these brain blockers, as they say, they don't get the insulin to the brain, which now causes another problem, which is why we have Alzheimer's. So she did this study some years back, and she said her hospital that she studied in the 70s, black people weren't having this Alzheimer's issue at all. And the white professors and doctors, they said, what do you mean, blacks can't get so-and-so? She says, well, I'm just telling you, they don't have this Alzheimer's stuff. And I have the actual interview, so maybe one day you guys want to check it out. I'll share it with you. But the point I'm making is, as a doctor, the discovery of many, many things that are going on are causing people that are darker hue to have problems. The darker you are, the more you absorb things. Now, you know, most of these drugs are made with lipids. Black people have more absorption because darker you are, the more you absorb energy. The lighter you are, I guess, the less you do. So the country that we're living in doesn't really have an environment made for us friendly. So I just
Woody, while you know the old commercial, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV, and while you're playing one on radio, I want to make sure that our two esteemed medical practitioners concur with that statement about being darker and absorbing things. Dr. Northington Gamble, is that something that you are aware of, or?
You know, I would be very careful about, how we talk about things like black people don't get X, Y, or Z. I think that, we just need to be very careful. Black people come in all hues. There are also South Asians who are darker than I am. So I think we just need to be very careful, saying that in the 70s, black people did not get Alzheimer's. We weren't talking about Alzheimer's in the 70s the way we are now. And that a lot of times when people say, well, black people don't get something, we don't get the resources that we need.
Well, we may not have been talking about Alzheimer's, but back in the 70s, we all knew that Uncle Henry had some issues. We all knew that. We just didn't give it a name. Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble, we need to take a quick break. Are you okay on time? Because we have some more calls for you, and we like to be able to take them. For those of you just joining us, we are pleased to be in the company of our friends from Just Human Productions. Earlier on, we listened to the podcast called Epidemic, and we talked about how diseases And the treatments of those diseases sometimes runs afoul because of the lack of trustworthiness of the hands that are administering the cures and the cares. We are joined by Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble, and right after this break, we'll come back and continue our phone calls at 215-634-8065. Stay with us.
Berger Montague is a Philadelphia-based plaintiffs' class action law firm committed to helping Philadelphia's Black community. Berger Montague maintains a strong commitment to fostering diversity and equity throughout the legal community and in society in general. In 2020, Berger Montague filed a pro bono case against the IRS when they refused to send COVID-19 stimulus checks to federal benefits recipients with dependent children. Thanks to Berger Montague, people across the United States were able to obtain dependent benefit checks that they desperately needed. Berger Montague supports WURD Radio and Philadelphia's Black community. For more information about Berger Montague Law Firm, please call 215-875-3033 or email at info@bm.net.
So, what's the asking price on this house?
You'd probably be more comfortable living somewhere else.
How long a lease is the landlord looking for?
Well, I'm sure you can afford to live here, but...
What are the schools like in this district?
Yeah, we have twins in the 5th grade.
This neighborhood isn't really for your kids. You know what I mean?
If you're Black, Latino, Asian American, or Middle Eastern, and a real estate agent or rental agent says anything like this, you know what it means. You're being discriminated against. Housing discrimination because of race, color, or national origin is against the law. If you believe you've experienced housing discrimination, contact HUD. Go to HUD.gov/fair housing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Fair housing. The law is on your side. A message from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
WURD TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at WURD. WURD TV. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
It's 25 minutes after the hour 6. We are joined by Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. They are both a part of Just Human Productions. We listened to the podcast Epidemic to talk more about diseases, how they're supposed to be treated, and what happens when credibility is lost between the practicing physicians and medical care facilities and those who are supposedly being treated, in this case, African American communities. Dr. Gounder, Dr. Northington Gamble, welcome back to you. I want to ask you a question about what takes the place of solid medical information when a lack of trust or a lack of trustworthiness, Dr. Northington Gamble, prevents me from being able to accept what I am being told by the professionals. I mean, I know that you both have heard a lot of the old wives' tales. I remember when the coronavirus came out and all of the Black churches said, we don't have to close because Black people don't get coronavirus. I remember that. I remember when HIV/AIDS came out and it says, we don't have to worry about that. Only white, gay males get that. And then we found out that both of these things aren't true. So talk a little bit about how the vacuum of good information gets filled by old wives' tales. I see you nodding, Dr. Gounder.
No, I think this is such an important point because what we are realizing is that a lot of the information we're trying to get out there is not reaching the very communities we're hoping to reach. I would say, in particular, young communities of color. And this, again, goes back to historical racism where, for very good reasons, people have not engaged with, say, some of the mainstream media. They come to a place like WURD for their news. And it's because you guys are trusted institutions that represented your community. But many of us in public health are not coming to places like WURD. We're trying to get the information out on, I don't know, CNN or whatever platform it is, that are not platforms that reach those communities. So we really need to do a much better job of bridging that gap, of working with the media organizations that really do reach, especially young Black and brown people.
I mean, the other thing too is back in the day, if it were just the old wives' tale is one thing. But right now we're dealing with disinformation on social media. You know, people don't watch CNN or MSNBC or even Fox the way that people engage with the internet. And so that's the other thing in terms of information, disinformation coming through of the internet. And people think when they see something posted that it's true. And so that, I mean, I think with this particular epidemic, we are really fighting that.
I mean, so it's not only an epidemic of physiological proportions, but it's an epidemic of informational proportions. Let's get back to the phone lines, 215-634-8065. Born in North Philadelphia, you are with Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. Welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, Nick, and good evening, Dr. Gamble and Dr. Gounder.
Good evening.
Question I have is, have any of you read an article published by the National Institutes of Health dated January 26, 2021, titled Lasting Immunity Found After Recovery from COVID-19?
You have to, yeah, I may have well seen this. There are so many things that are published every day. Exactly. It's drinking through a fire hose, but I may well have seen this.
The reason why I ask is Dr. Fauci was very adamant that people who contracted COVID-19 would have, and this is when he was asked by a member of the press if there was such a thing as antibodies and causing individuals to develop any long-term immunity to the disease. He said he just brushed them off with, and I thought it was very disrespectful the way he did. He said, "Oh no, it would be a few weeks, a month at most." Now, if I'm correct, he gets information from the National Institutes of Health, because I've heard him quote them before. If either of you have not read this, you should read it. It's a very good article. That is one thing that caused me not to trust Dr. Fauci. Another thing is Dr. Fauci was very adamant that the disease could not have come out of that lab. Early on, he was very adamant that it had to be something that came from the animal to humans. I think the bat or the monkey to humans. Now there's information coming out that it's a very good chance that it was an accident at that lab. And that's coming out more and more every day. Now, thirdly, what role are you aware of that Dr. Fauci and any organization that he's associated with had with any research going on at the Wuhan lab?
Yeah, so I can take this. So Dr. Fauci works at the National Institutes of Health. He's the director. So it's the National Institutes. There are multiple institutes at the NIH, one of which is Dr. Fauci's institute, which is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. With respect to the durability of immunity you get from natural infection, it is not as durable and it is not as strong. And perhaps one of the best case studies of this is what happened in a city in Brazil. It's a city, Manaus, which is in the Amazon. 75% of the population in that city got COVID in their first wave.
Wow.
And yeah, right? 75%, it was massive. And then they had a huge second wave. So, you know, this whole idea of natural immunity being protective, if it were, they wouldn't have had a second wave. And if you were watching TV at the time, you would have seen these mass burials where they were literally having to build vertical graves, one body on top of the other. They had all these people trying to track down oxygen tanks for their loved ones in the hospital. It was such a crisis. So, I mean, that's a really great case study of natural immunity does not provide long-term immunity.
Is untrue? Are you saying that the National Institute
you know, it's very difficult to have a discussion about a specific article without seeing it, but I am just summarizing for you what the evidence shows across the board.
the website looking at it right now. It's been there for months.
We believe that you're looking at it, but unfortunately, Dr. Gounder's not looking at it. So while we take what you're saying as being representative of the truth that you're beholding, Dr. Gounder is answering based upon what she has before her. Dr. Northington Gamble, is there something that you might want to add before we?
No, I have nothing to add. I think Dr. Gounder handled, she's more on the ground with this. And so, working with President Biden's, Corona task force. So she's more on the ground with this than
I appreciate that call. Thank you so much for the call, Born. We move forward now to Olaniyan in Nicetown. Olaniyan, thank you for your call, and welcome to our conversation with Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble.
You are being given, you're welcome. I'm calling because in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the health center at 19th and Berks, I experienced, unfortunately, sexual abuse by a medical doctor, and I need legal assistance. I was awarded a settlement from the city.
Okay, Olaniyan, I'm not sure whether or not this fits into the scope of our conversation. It just so happens that I spent a great deal of my childhood at that same medical facility because my mother was the EKG technician at 20th and Berks, which is where I think that was Health District number 8. Is that the one?
5.
Number 5, is that what? I'm getting old. I forget me sometimes. But I'm not sure that this might be the forum for you to discuss this particular aspect of what you have experienced. Is there some other way that we can assist you in your thoughts today?
With the same subject or something else?
Well, it would be nice if we were the same subject because that's what brings our guests to us today.
Well, I'd like to speak with them off the telephone, and that would be nice.
Well, unfortunately, I can't quite arrange that for you, but if you wish to mail something in, and if it's relevant to the work that they are doing, I will do my level best to make sure that we get it to them. This is not at all to dismiss any experiences that you may have gone through. Abuse is never something to be taken lightly, but we can't quite address it at this time. I appreciate your calling in. It's 26 minutes away from the hour of 7 o'clock. We're going to continue in our conversation. Before we take our next call, Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble, how do we negotiate the continual pendulum, particularly in a community that has had to live with incredible things happening, and I use that word in its proper denotation, things that just are almost unbelievable. And then in the next line, you hear someone saying, but I read this, and that must be true. And then in the next sentence, somebody will get on TV and they say, well, you know that they're lying. How do you deal with that back and forth, the seesaw of credibility, incredibility, belief, can't believe? Dr. Northington Gamble?
I mean, I think it's a given. I mean, I think these days, anyone in healthcare has to realize that that is a part of what we need to do. The pendulum swings, people come in, with new information. I think part of our job is to keep up with what the new information is, or what, when the pendulum swings. But, I think that is, that's a part of not just working with patients, but also communicating with the public.
Dr. Gounder, I mean, is it, I know as a disease detective and discovering things, when people hear something new, they immediately look and say, who created it and who are they aiming it at? I mean.
Well, and that kind of goes to the earlier question about, was the virus created in a Wuhan lab, or was this the result of an accident in the lab? And to be clear, it remains far, far, far more likely that this was a natural spillover event from animal species into humans. It's what we've seen over and over again. It's how you get new strains of the flu. It's how Ebola has spread. It's how HIV emerged. So this is just the way of how infectious diseases come to be. There is no evidence that this was engineered in a lab or a lab accident. But when it comes to how do you vet medical information, I will say, as somebody who does a lot of media, a lot of television, a lot of newspaper and other kinds of interviews, I find it really frustrating that the people who are producers, editors, don't really vet who comes on as an expert always. They can't tell the difference because they don't have the expertise. And I think this is an area where the media, frankly, has an obligation, a duty, an ethical responsibility to do better, because the information people receive on television, it may not be a prescription, but it can have a real impact on people's health.
I totally agree with that. I did a webinar a few weeks ago for the Black Women's Health Imperative with a group of journalists. And that's one of the things that I mentioned about vetting who comes on. But the other thing that I think that's important for this time is that with COVID-19 is the uncertainty. This is the first time we've dealt with this particular virus, and we did not know what was going to be happening. And so things did change, information changed. And that I think when there is a vacuum and when there's uncertainty, that breeds even more misinformation and disinformation.
Well, I want you to know that the two of you have helped to kind of put the first bricks in the foundation of building the trustworthiness that we spoke about. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to kind of give us a clearer vision on what's being done and ways that we can create a more trustworthy medical delivery apparatus. We've been speaking with Dr. Celine Gounder. She is an infectious disease specialist and an internist at the New York University School of Medicine. She was a part of President-elect Biden's COVID-19 Advisory Board and the host and producer of the Epidemic and American Diagnosis podcast. And we were joined with Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble, University Professor of Medical Humanities at the George Washington University, and also Professor of Health Policy at the Milken Institute School of Public Health and Professor of American Studies in the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Gounder and Dr. Northington Gamble, thank you so much for edifying us with your experience and your information, and I look forward to the next time that we get a chance to converse.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure is mine, I assure you. Folks, look, for those of you who didn't realize it, you went to school today. I will send you a bill later on. Thank you, Doctor and Doctor. We'll take this quick pause, and then we'll come back right here on WURD 96.1, 900 AM. This is Nick. We'll return after this.
I'm on the first train of the morning.
By 7:30.
I go in when it's dark.
Llego a las 5 de la mañana durante la semana.
From first thing to third shift.
SEPTA is the Philly way to go.
Plan your trip at iseptaphilly.com.
Enterprise Exterminators, located at 4943 Wayne Avenue, has been in business since 1976 and can eliminate whatever pest problems you have. Enterprise specializes in bed bugs, lanternflies, and termites. Call for your free termite inspection today. Do-it-yourself kits are available. Enterprise Exterminators, servicing Philadelphia, Delaware, and New Jersey. Call now, 215-849-7070. Ask us about the WURD and senior discounts.
Save the date. Thursday, August 26th for WURD Radio's annual Founders Day celebration, honoring the life of our founder, Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD.
This year, we'll be both in person and virtual.
Stay tuned to WURD Radio and WURDradio.com for more information.
That's Thursday, August 26th for our annual Founders Day celebration.
Exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Streaming live on WURDradio.com, the WURD Radio app,
or watch live on WURD TV via Facebook and YouTube.
TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at WURD. WURD TV. Black Talk Media.
You're listening to Evening Words, hosted by Nick Taliaferro, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Hey, folks, we're sorry that we had to break away. For those of you who are waiting to ply your questions with our experts, they were on somewhat of a short leash that we extended just a little bit. But it is such a privilege to be educated, to learn things that you didn't know. I never heard of the polyheme study. I didn't know about J. Marion Sims experimenting on pregnant women without anesthesia, pregnant black women. We're going to get back to the phone lines now, and our conversation continues with Spread Love. Spread Love, thank you for calling, and welcome to the program.
God bless, Brother Nick. How you making out, family?
I am good, sir. It's good to hear your voice.
Okay, the honor's all mine. Give thanks. I would ask, is this still being produced as part of the podcast, as I was informed?
Nah, you good, bro.
No. It's the podcast part is done now. It's just straight evening words.
Time to get loose. First and foremost, let's send some love to my brother DJ Frosty Phoenix, Eric Nixon on the boards, always doing an amazing job. The entire WRD family. Let's always remember everyone suffering, everyone working to make it better, all those incarcerated, especially incarcerated falsely. Free Mumia. And Brother Nick, I would advise this. I would advise anyone within the sound of common sense to not blindly trust the allopathic medical industry. Case in point, on your show you spotlighted a couple of weeks ago the scam with the opioid prescriptions from the doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You remember how you spotlighted also Acres of Skin, the experimentation on the prisoners?
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah, someone else was mentioning that book, yeah.
All right. Now, me personally, I've seen firsthand the deception, the incompetence, the malpractice, and the negligence. So anybody who wants to substantiate anything I'm purporting, you can check out Dr. Vernon Coleman. He posts videos on YouTube and brandnewtube.com, brandnewtube.com. Also, there's a book you can get. You can look it up called Stop. Before you have surgery, read this. It's a brother, Donovan King, Donald Donovan King, if I remember his name correctly. I think he actually was on WRD with the Elder Ross Lloyd Cummings, where he was talking about the negligence he had to suffer and the lack of his ability to get justice from a surgery he had to have. So I would just say, if all these sinister things are being revealed about this industry, I would say it is good practice to think twice.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that our guest just said is, ask questions and make sure that your questions get answered. I mean, there's a need for vigilance, but on the other hand, Spread Love is the issue. There's a need for medical care. I mean, and so, there are people. Remember the folks who used to say, "I didn't want to go to the doctor and get this looked at because if they cut you open, if it's cancer, it's going to spread when the air hits it." Remember that one?
No, I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, I mean, man, they used to say that all the time. That man, if once you go to the doctor, once they open you up, it just spreads. I mean, I would hear that all the time. And in the absence of viable, valid, vouched for information, that vacuum gets filled with legends, rumors, half truths, and myths. And we've got to be able to do a little bit better than that.
Three things I would ask. One, let's look at who's doing the vouching and why. For example, if I was considered a habitual liar, I would be considered a sociopath. Case in point, the previous president. So if we're dealing with an industry that's shown to be habitually lying, I think it's wise to think twice. Case in point number two, we got our brother Dr. Paul. Comes on WRD on Saturdays and Sundays. We can address him as far as information is concerned. So my advice is just be cautious. Because I know if I owed somebody $5, they'd think twice about lending me 10.
Well said. Hey, you know, I think the spread love makes a good point. You know, it's the point of caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. Look, do due diligence. I mean, you know, trust doesn't mean you don't verify, as Ronald Reagan once said. Thank you for that call, spread love. Final call comes from George in Center City. George, thank you for calling. Welcome to the show.
Nick, I wanted to say we had a real good show today. Dealing with mental health, dealing with the women's issue, you know, about the salary.
I can barely hear you, George. You're a little muffled there.
Hello?
Or much better.
Yeah. I say you had a very good show today. You dealt with several issues that I really, you know, take very good. The mental illness, you know, you dealt with that pretty good. You dealt with the athletes and the thing of the money and, you know, the pressure that they get. You did a real good job on that, Nick. One other thing, Nick, I think if you could do it probably before the week is out, you know, Sheriff Joe Williams got exonerated from all of that. The women withdrew the petition with prejudice.
Oh, really?
And, yes, all 6 of them. They all dropped everything. They, you know, it's no longer and everything. They just dropped the whole thing. And I don't think it's right because it was part of that Me Too women's movement that they had. And all these women in the city that, you know, persecuted him, I think you're the one that could bring Jewel on, or those 5 women. Ask them why did they, you know, pull out of the thing, all the claims they made. They just went on and dropped it with prejudice. I mean, I was shocked that, you know, they were, all the things they were saying and so adamant about it. And had all these other women, you know, just, you know, when they get on this thing, you know, they just don't know when to stop. And it was an ugly situation that didn't come out like they thought. So if you could get either or on, I'm quite sure you know how to get a hold of Jules.
By all means, yeah. When was this? When did this? Did this happen today?
No, it happened like almost a couple weeks ago.
Man, I missed that one completely.
Yeah, I was at a meeting, and this year was one of the things that came up, and they were saying that, yeah, you know, they're going to have to deal with vengeance, you know, with this Me Too stuff, and all over the country. They're finding out that during the Me Too movement, that a lot of these people are finding that women are withdrawing their cases.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I will certainly look into that one.
Is that they did it during the time of elections, and they did it to a lot of elected officials, make accusations, and, you know, with no proof, no nothing, just say it, and it's the gospel, you know, and I hope he's suing. I hope he's suing for every dime they got. You know, you just don't go around making up stuff on people, and it's not to be true just because you're going to come out of the way and ruin their career.
You know, I don't want to vet this story without talking to individuals who are part of the story, but I mean, for sure, it factored into the last election. For sure, it factored into the last election. I've known Jules since, wow, since we were in grade school. And so...
Me and his brother went to school together, and you and him, y'all went to...
we went to school together.
Right.
Yeah.
Me and him, his brother went from Mansion all the way to Ben Franklin, you know, Jules. So, I mean, his brother.
Well, hey, listen, man.
I was really shocked, Nick. I was really shocked. I was in the meeting with all these lawyers, and they were saying, I don't believe that. You know, and they got, it's all in writing. You know, it's a matter of public.
Well, I'm going to look into this one. I mean, this is an interesting development, and of course, I mean, as you know,
like, it's going to be big embarrassment. A lot of these there's a lot of prominent women in this city went after Jewel on accusations opposed to waiting to see what the facts were. And,
well, you know, it is. There are all sorts of reasons why people drop cases. The reason that you would hope is that people drop a case because they say, okay, I realize that I misunderstood something. I don't know enough about this one. I do know that there were several women, and it was, you're absolutely right, it was a part of the Me Too movement, and it definitely factored into the election. And if they have all dropped their cases, George...
Every last one of them has dropped their cases.
Trust me, I'm going to look into this one tonight after I finish my midweek prayer service. at church, I'll look right into this one. I appreciate the info.
Yeah, and one other thing, Nick, I need you to look into real quick. And like I said, the chapter about these guns is closed. You know, with me, that's closed. Everybody's moving on to the new thing. The new thing is now they're going to try to hustle kids to try to get funding, and there's nothing they can do about the guns. After they heard it clearly, they heard it from some other law enforcement people telling the same thing I told you about. Those guns are not guns until certain things happen, and that's why they couldn't do anything about it. So everybody's getting away from that and try to find their next election, poise, thing that they can podium they can stand up on.
But you're saying what? You said one other thing. I only got about 30 seconds left for you.
Well, I'm saying, I think that if we start looking into this thing about the strike that's going to come up, with SEPTA, District Council 33, the PFT, all these people are going to be striking at the year about the same time. The FOP, the firefighters. It happens like every 10 or 15 years, but all of the contracts goes about the same time.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I must admit, and I'm sure that you're closer to a lot of these unions and some of these movers than I am, but we'll definitely look into that as to whether or not strikes are coming along. The last thing that this city needs as we come out of the pandemic, as we come out of the quarantine, as we try to find our way to a new normal, is to be dislodged and distracted by an unnecessary strike. Now, there are times when people need to strike. There are times when people need to express the lack of acceptance of the pay packages that they're getting and the way that they're being treated. I'll be checking that one out, along with this story about Jewel Williams. Man, that's information right there. The one about Jewel Williams. Speaking of information, ladies and gentlemen, I got something for you. If you're looking to get diverse talent, if you're trying to find people who can do a little bit of this, a little of that, but do it all well, WURD has got you covered. I mean, we have got you covered from stem to stern because we've just launched a new job portal that will help you connect with the diverse pool of talent that exists in the Delaware Valley area, the Philadelphia metropolitan area, and beyond. And if you want to have your job featured before a lot of people who are interested, eager, and capable, give us a call at 215-425-7875. That's 215-425-7875. Or you can send us an email at sales@wordradio.com. Check out our job portal today on our livelihood website. That's located at wordworks.com. That's WURDworks.com. Click on jobs and you'll be on your way to finding the team of workers that will take you over the hump. Hey, folks, I got to get ready to say farewell. Coming along in just another 5 minutes, you check in with Sincerely Sarita. She's asking that you save a little space for her. I want to thank my guest who joined us today. We were joined by Dr. Akuya Boateng, who is a practicing psychotherapist here in the city of Philadelphia. We talked about stress as it concerns black women in particular in the wake of the Simone Biles pullout from the Olympics and the Naomi Osaka situation. And then we were joined by Dr. Celine Gounder and Dr. Vanessa Northington Gamble. They joined us by way of our friends from and why can't I remember, just like that, Just Human Productions. Don't get old, folks. It's not good for you. We want to thank our two guests who joined us. And we listened to the podcast Epidemic as we talked about infectious diseases, how they're treated, but more importantly, about the trust factor between the medical profession and the black community. I thank our two guests for joining us. More than that, we thank you for being a part of our program. And on behalf of all of the great people who make it possible for us to spend this time in elucidating and enlightening and empowering conversation, including our producer of renown, Mr. Eric Nixon, I'm Nick Taliaferro, wishing you a great day today, a better one tomorrow, and I will see you again right here on the radio. Have a good Wednesday, everybody.